started. We're already a couple minutes behind, so got a little catching up to do. My name is Lauren Collins, and I am a public services librarian at Wayne State University, located in Midtown Detroit. And the title of my presentation is Build and Shattered Dreams, What If You Build It and They Still Don't Come? Sounds a little dramatic, and I tend to be, so I will boil this down to let you know what I am going to talk about today is how we are undertaking attempts to get the faculty to use existing university-wide resources to help them, to encourage them and support them as they integrate technology into teaching. I should be clicking this. As you'll see, I am not the technology guru at all. I am actually working to become a go-between with the people on campus who are. So this story starts about 4 months ago. I have been at Wayne State now for about 10 months. And I noticed that we had university-wide resources that our faculty were not using. The and if you build it, what if you build it and they still don't come? It's called the Office of Teaching and Learning. And there are handouts going around that give you a little bit of information about the Office of Teaching and Learning, what they do. But they primarily have instructional technology specialists that will help faculty members across campus integrate technology in the classroom and for course management. And what I found when I first got on campus was that in the last 3 school years, there are 2 documented occurrences of law faculty visiting the Office of Teaching and Learning. Anecdotally, I've been told that there are at least 2 more who have come to open houses and things like that but have not used the resources. So the challenge is getting them to actually use the resources. And that's me, boldly going where no law librarian at Wayne has gone before, charting new territory, trying to get the word out that we have this great resource that is open to law faculty and that they are willing to come up with programming specific to law faculty. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Wayne State. It is in, again, Midtown Detroit, which I'm from Detroit, born and bred, and that used to be called the Cultural Center, but now I guess Midtown is cool. So it's called Midtown. We have about 33,000 students currently working on kicking that number up to 40,000. A lot of them are transient. We are just in the final phases of, I think, our 3rd on-campus housing, residential housing facility. So for the most part, our students come and go. We have 6 libraries under a single library system, including the law library, which is different than most of you deal with every day. So I'll show you some of the challenges that come about having to deal with the fact that we are not a law school entity. We have 4 law librarians and 1 student technician who is working on a master's in library science but has a JD, so we have been able to integrate him into a lot of our reference and a lot of our programs. At any given time, we have about 45 full-time faculty and 40 part-time faculty. And we have a very active evening program, which is why we have quite a few adjuncts across campus. So that's an issue that the Office of Teaching and Learning is used to dealing with. We are not in any way, shape, or form different than the rest of the university when it comes to having a lot of faculty that are not in front of us on a daily basis. We have about 850 students at any given time, day, evening, and LLM programs. Here's the challenge that we're faced with. We are part of the library system, as are the Office of Teaching and Learning, which is the resource I'm trying to get the faculty to use, and Media Services, which provide support when faculty do endeavor to use technology in teaching. The law school is a separate entity with its own IT department, which consists of 1 person, and sometimes that 1 person has a student. In the summer, maybe 1, in the fall and winter terms, maybe 2 part-time students, but that department primarily deals with faculty's everyday use of technology at the desk. So what they're doing from their desk, there is not that much support from that department for presentations, classroom teaching, things that they do when it comes to actually being within the law school. And so Media Services is considered a service provider to the law school, as is the Office of Teaching and Learning. And then we do have a reciprocal relationship, even though we are not a unit within the law school with the law school office. Media Services in the Office of Teaching and Learning are in the process of sharing resource. So they, by fall, will be moved into the same place and will have resources for all of the faculty across the campus in one place, which is, of course, not in the law school. So that's an issue that we're dealing with, bringing this whole right side together with the left. And I'll talk about how this can be a little bit challenging. One of the things that we are trying not to do is to overextend ourselves, of course, but also we want to make sure that our vision is different than the Office of Teaching and Learning and Media Services that are looking at the faculty as a whole. We're looking only at our faculty. This is my favorite slide, and no one I've shown this has understood exactly what I was trying to say. Does anybody get this? It leaves the library in between a rock and a hard place. And my idea to get around that has been, is to create the little red arrows, to create a relationship between the Office of Teaching and Learning and the Law Library and Media Services. We already have a relationship because we come under the same umbrella, but not with the focus of serving our particular faculty, which are different than other faculty across the university. So I have created an unofficial committee of these three entities that look only at how we will serve our particular faculty. They had not been looking at us as being different in any way in the past. And now we have to understand that our faculty are different in so many ways. The way they teach, their willingness to be mobile, for example, even though we're all on the same campus. Part of the reason that faculty have been hesitant to use the Office of Teaching and Learning is because it's across campus. And one of the things that the Office of Teaching and Learning did not know they would need to do and are willing to do is travel. So something that small has been an issue. So a little bit about the Office of Teaching and Learning. During the fall and winter terms, they have a regular schedule of courses that they give, workshops, on things like using PowerPoint effectively, using the Blackboard platform effectively. They will come into classrooms, observe classroom teaching, and adapt what technology they recommend to your style of teaching. They will customize, and that's what we're working on now, customizing for the law school. They have equipment loans for things that the law school rooms are not already outfitted with. So a lot of things, they have a pretty extensive library of information from the information technology standpoint to help people integrate technology into their teaching. And in order for this to work, even though Media Services is not a player in the encouragement of using technology in teaching, there is an idea amongst some faculty that they take part in discouraging the use of technology in teaching. And it's difficult for us because for Media Services to look at the law faculty the way that they should, because the relationship has been very rocky over time. That has primarily arisen from the fact that Media Services outfits all of the other classrooms in campus but ours. Even though they don't outfit ours, they are expected to provide support for ours. So there is a bit of a disconnect in the way that they have had interactions in the past. Now there are some upcoming changes. There will be several rooms that are outfitted directly by Media Services in the future, and actually by the fall. So that is going to clear up some of the misconceptions that we have had to deal with. Another problem is that there's no clear law school liaison. There only being one IT person that services the whole law school, that's kind of difficult to do. And at one point, there was a liaison, and that position has kind of fluctuated. Let me just interrupt myself to say that I don't I hope not to stand here and lecture for the whole hour, because this is something that we are currently undertaking. This is a project that we are in the midst of. And I have only been a law librarian for fewer than 2 years. So anything that anybody can say that helps me to make this picture a little more rosy, please, just throw it at me. When we first came in and the CALI representatives talked to people who would be speaking, they talked about how it was equally important to hear about failures as successes. And I'm not at the point where I'm a failure yet, but it could go either way. So anything that anybody can say to be helpful, please. Just, and I'm a little nervous, so I might not see you. Just start yelling. One of the things that helped illuminate this issue to me was visiting faculty one-on-one. That was one of the first things that I did as my orientation to the library. And what I found were 3 levels of technology user among our law faculty. The first were the newer librarians, the newer faculty members. And I tried to look at the barriers in front of them. I found the consistent barrier among all of these users was time, a barrier for us as well in meeting their needs. So that one is going to be a prevailing thing. But I also found that the newer faculty members were the higher technology users in most cases. They used a variety of tools inside and outside the classroom. But one of the major barriers that they had was that they were not yet tenured, and that technology use had not yet been recognized on the tenure track. So there was no incentive when it came to the question of tenure to increase any knowledge of technology over and above what they were already using. The second level of user was the mid-level user, and their primary barrier seemed to be knowledge. They knew that there were things out there, they were using them to some extent, but not using them as effectively as they could have. And that was because they didn't know how, didn't have the time to find out how, hadn't made the best use of the Office of Teaching and Learning, and thought that would be an inconvenient use of their time. So again, time is an issue, but this time it's related to the knowledge level. And then finally we had those professors who have no interest in integrating technology into their teaching. Some who actually knew a lot about the use of technology and just didn't think it fit their teaching style. Some who knew nothing and didn't care. Some who won't even use email. I do a newsletter. I have to distribute at least 3 newsletters in print every other month when I do that. So there are some who wouldn't even open up a publisher file and read a newsletter. And I have to recognize that some of those people with no interest will never have interest. But some of those people are past the point where tenure is an issue, and this is something new and interesting, and if we can encourage them and can get them to a particular point, we don't have to lose them. So this was kind of the picture that I had when I started of what I had to work with. So what I wanted to do was to kind of organize that earlier picture a little differently so that everybody knew what their part in the game was. Still have the library system, of course, that is the umbrella of the 3 units that I'm working with primarily, and the law faculty as our end product. But now we have a better idea of what each of us is going to do. One of the real challenges that we have as a law librarian is that we are the visual embodiment of the library system for a lot of the law faculty. So they don't see the Office of Teaching and Learning because they aren't in their building. They don't contact media services until they have an issue. And many times they see us as the segue into either of those 2 entities. And though we want to have some place in what programming is provided and what assistance is provided, we don't want necessarily the faculty coming to the library when a video recorder doesn't work because we can't fix it. So what was everybody's role was the question. And we came up with the decision that the media services role was troubleshooting and equipment access. And that one of the things that we had to think about doing was making it clear what they did, how they did it, because they are short-staffed too, working with the entire university community. Office of Teaching and Learning, we had to make sure that they understood that there were some things that they had to do differently for law faculty, and it was up to us to understand enough to impart to them what kind of different things they needed to learn how to do. So the first step in this whole project that I've undertaken is a survey. And the idea of that is to do the needs assessment to find out where faculty are in a more specific way than the discussions, the one-on-one discussions I've been having, and to find out where they want to be. If anybody was in an earlier session about why students do and don't use CALI, eventually I'm going to get to a point where what I decided to do was a survey. It ended up being a little difficult, and I'll tell you why later. But before I could even sit down and start writing the survey, I had to create support for the idea of pulling all these pieces together. And the first place I went was law school, because the Office of Teaching and Learning, Media Services are already divisions of the library system, already know that they're providing these particular services. There was no difference between our faculty and the other faculty on the campus, so I didn't have to encourage them to serve the faculty. But I did have to encourage the law school to be receptive. So I went to the law school dean, and what he agreed to do was provide lunch to sit down and talk about it to generate interest, and it worked better than I thought it would. I also wanted to make sure that there were law faculty that had some buy-in in the project. So for the first lunch, my speakers were mainly law faculty members who came out and talked about how they used technology for course management tools, and there was a presentation on using PowerPoint effectively in Socratic method teaching. Then, after I had gotten the law school on board, I went to the Office of Teaching and Learning and Media Services and got their buy-in and their support to come in and also speak at this informational session. One thing that I noticed since I've been a law librarian is that we tend to stop by the desks where there's a prize involved, drop your name in. So I got Lexis and Westlaw to support the survey by donating prizes for people who would respond to it. And then finally, all of those one-on-ones that I had when I first started at the law school, the projects that I had started were existing relationships that I was able to use to get buy-in from faculty. So the faculty members who I had done projects for already were willing to come and speak, were willing to support the idea of the survey. No questions yet? No. Great ideas? No. Tell me where I missed steps.
Out of curiosity, when you all set up this department, was there any type of a needs assessment or anything done basically, or was it?
The Office of Teaching and Learning?
Yeah.
There was, but there was no focus on our faculty. There was no recognition that they would be any different. There was no outreach separate and apart from everything else.
Okay, from the rest of the camps, they weren't seem to be using it, so it's just the law faculty would have to be a problem.
It's not just the law faculty. The medical school doesn't use it as much as some of the other disciplines. There are some of the disciplines, School of Education being one, that have created some incentives for using the Office of Teaching and Learning. But we haven't gotten to that point yet, so we're a little, yes.
How did you decide which faculty should talk at the first lunch? And where did they fall on your level of high to not? Obviously not the non-users, but into.
They were, interesting enough, one of the faculty members that spoke has her own website. She uses no casebook. Everything comes from her website. She does not use any technology in the classroom. So, and then the other person who spoke makes some use of his twin and Blackboard sites, but uses PowerPoint in the classroom. So they were on very different ends of the spectrum, but both high users. And that, for the most part, came from personal relationships, having dealt with them. They were heavy library users, and I had dealt with them in the past, so I begged. Short answer.
Just out of curiosity, is this learning center only for faculty or is it open for students also?
It is only open to students who are working towards teaching, instructional technology students and students who are trying to pull together a portfolio to teach, but not otherwise.
I know like, at Tech Law School, we found that sometimes we also think the students first, because the faculty isn't interested and they start using it, the faculty are almost forced to, you know, just like let's say like in the law, the legal industry itself. You take a firm that does not really use email, doesn't have good technology, they're not going to get the clients. You get a client that comes up and says, hey, I'm having a tax problem, I want you to work on, you can download all my files, stuff, this site, and I'm going to be out of town, so you can email me, then keep track of this email. You can't support it, you're not going to do business with them.
Well, we have had students who have requested the kinds of things that come out of the Office of Teaching and Learning. For example, there's a huge movement across the university they recently discovered that fewer than 50% of the faculty were using Blackboard. And there's a huge movement to incentivize the use of Blackboard because students are complaining, particularly because we have such a transient population, about not being able to get information. So that is leading to an incentivized use of Blackboard, which would lead to people to have to come to the Office of Teaching and Learning if they didn't know how to use something like that. But we're not having, no one has tried to do this by inviting students into the Office of Teaching and Learning directly so far. Yes?
I have a very similar, well, it's almost the same organizational structure to the media departments within the library. We provide the services to the classroom. Our Office of Teaching and Learning is part of university libraries. It's called Educational Technology Center. And we face some of the same kinds of issues, or I do in my day-to-day work.
Can I have your phone?
And what I generally do is I treat these outside parties as subcontractors. I bring them in when I need them. I'm always the point of contact, or my department's always the point of contact for that. I can also hijack their services for students because, like your organization, they don't directly support students. But I can do that under the guise of my department and use their facilities with the help of the faculty members, so that works well too. And we've been doing this for 15 years pretty much. So but there's more centralization to it, less committee structure, less infrastructure that you have to keep running with the change of people and that sort of thing.
Okay, so my question to you is, we're at the point where we're trying to figure out what every player wants, but particularly what our user wants, and that is the faculty. What have you done in order, well, you've been doing it 15 years, so I guess at this point you know what they want and need. We're still at the point of figuring that out.
We have, as far as the faculty is concerned specifically, we have a pretty good gauge of what each individual faculty member wants or needs. I've been there long enough where I know the faculty and where they're in my office a lot, and I'm in there, so I know which projects they want to start, where they want to take technology and that sort of thing. And if we don't have it within the law school, we go out to the Educational Technology Center and send them in that direction. You sort of implied that they don't necessarily like to go outside the law school, neither do ours, but more and more I'm encouraging them to do that, and some of them are doing that. Basically, you really have to know what your faculty want and need, and I have the advantage of being there much longer, but it does work, and I have to say it works fairly well, I think. There are problems, like IT, as in your organization, is part of the law school with media services or instructional technology
particularly when IT is one person who does what becomes
Right.
an issue.
So you have those kinds of issues going on, and they have to be resolved on a regular level.
Well, not having that experience under my belt, and the fact that, as I will get into, out of the approximately 85 faculty members that we have, I got 13 responses to my survey. All of those being people that I had already had the chance to sit down with and had a general idea of where they were and where they wanted to go, has been one of the main challenges that I am at this point trying to get over, and don't necessarily want time to have to be the driving factor because I don't have a whole lot of it.
Well, the way we work this generally is we triage the faculty, as you just described earlier. We knew who the hardcore people were, the hardcore users, the people who were savvy. We went to those people first because frankly they're easier. Then we had a second group of people that used technology maybe half the time, or more specifically, they used any of our services, whether it be videotapes or whatever. And we focused on those two groups first. And the third group was the group that used it maybe once or twice or 3 times a semester. We gave some attention to them. And then there are those people who never use it. And I don't want to say we don't bother with them, we make our services known to them, but we don't focus on them at an individual level where I might sit down with them in their office and go over their needs like I do in the summertime. With quite a few faculty where my assistant does. So, and this is something we have going on all the time, so we break the faculty down into a smaller group. We have in the hardcore group, as we call them, people who use our technology for every class, every session, all the time, every semester. That's the group we focus on quite a bit.
One of the problems with that we found is that the kind of midpoint user is the one that can't do his or her own troubleshooting, ends up being the person who something crashes and the whole class depended on it. And we have to somehow make them a priority because they are the ones who are going to have the most trouble if things do not go the way that they're used to, as opposed to the hardcore who can kind of jiggle and fiddle with something and get it to work.
We, for those people, we have them too, and that's exactly what happens. We bring them in ahead of time. If it's going to be a complex setup, we sit them down, we go over everything with them. What could happen? We give them a cell phone number to call us if there's a problem. The students we have on that day and my assistant are aware that this is someone of a novice using technology. They're ready to go down there. We assign a student to go down to that class if there's a problem. We had 2 or 3 of those a semester.
It was a hand. Yes.
We're at the same process that you're at currently, and you asked about how do you know what faculty need. We just finished, in fact, it was just Tuesday of this week, a faculty interest form, we called it, which was a 2-sided 10 questions. What do you want to know? How do you want to know it? What time of day do you want to know it? Kind of thing. And we did it at a place where faculty gather monthly. They have to come to a faculty meeting. So it was a perfect venue for passing out this interest form and getting back from them, kind of thing. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, kind of thing. And I think it's a cultural change over time where you have to get them to recognize that it's a benefit. They've been successful teaching the way they're teaching. Why should they change?
Right, and that's something that my survey kind of brought out for me.
Right.
What the challenges that I have faced in trying to get out a 10-question survey have been, first, because of the different departments that I had to deal with. I had to have various levels of overview of a 10-question Zoomerang survey. I initially started this process early March thinking that I had time before the end of the term to get a full-fledged survey out. After the departmental reviews, I ran into the Human Investigations Committee, which was a brick wall. My department wanted to be able to share this information. If I was doing this and it would never be shared, I would not have had that barrier. But knowing that we might share this information at some point, I had to get IRB approved. It took for a 10-question survey to help improve services 8 weeks for the approval. By which time, my faculty were on planes to points unknown. So that is a huge part of the reason that I think my response level was low. And had I known that that barrier was going to exist for something that was, in my eyes, so uncomplex, I could have really done a little better, I believe, with the results that I got. And like I said, I was in a position where I wanted to get results very quickly because I had both of the 2 library departments dedicated to spending time over the summer to come up with programming, media services to work on a manual that points out all of their processes and the time frames that they need reporting in, because we have a lot, because of the large adjunct faculty, we have a lot of times when a call comes in at 4:45 about a class at 5 o'clock, and they simply can't respond that quickly. So there are a lot of those kinds of things that we wanted to see in writing, and while we had this time to do it, I was faced with, do I wait until I get a better population for my survey, or do I, and lose my summertime, or do I take the people that I know will respond and hang around for the summer and use that information? And being the impatient person that I am, I opted to use my summer. So I am now dealing with 13 responses out of about 85, which could be worse, in trying to figure out how to meet the needs of the faculty. And I think that at least those 13 people that I heard from are going to be pleasantly surprised, which hopefully will be something that I can use in the next iteration of this survey and this whole process. So these are just some of the things that I ran into that caused a bit of difficulty, and the ways that I tried to, once I got down the road and saw I was going to have these issues, try to use to help me encourage participation was a raffle that was supported by some of our vendors, was using Zoomerang to provide online access since they had already dispersed by the time I was able to get this out, and was every other day pushing out reminders, which I'm sure probably irritated some people greatly, but a lot of the people who I already had personal relationships kept saying, remind me, so I did. So here's what I found out. Basically, there were 10 questions. This was Zoomerang. Our university does not have a Zoomerang license, so I was limited to 10 questions, but they let you put as many subparts in there as you possibly can, so I used lots of subparts. Now, again, here is where I'm not the technological person, and I see all the heads moving like this because, yeah, I couldn't flip this thing. But what I wanted to know was what they were using, this will be a whole lot easier to read on your desktop, so webcast it. What they were using, what they wanted to use, whether or not they knew how to use what they were using properly, and what I found was what I expected. There is a lot of use of word processing software. That was no surprise. There's a mid-level use of PowerPoint and other technology-based presentation tools. No one uses a typewriter anymore, but quite a few people still use chalk and chalkboard, and I'll talk a little bit about why some of the professors will never stop doing that, because they don't understand that some of the technological advances are not as inflexible as they think they are. RSS, nobody's there yet. We do have a few that are using audio and video, and that was, for the most part, video. We have a pretty decent video collection, so some of those are being viewed. Web authoring tools, that was one of, I'm guessing, though I don't know, probably one of the people that we see clearly has a website, but there are only a few of those. A lot of use of Twin and Blackboard and things like that. But it was really all across the board, and the Office of Teaching and Learning is in a position to help with all of these. I've run all of these resources by them. They're in a position to help you with all of those resources. I found that I wanted to know what word processing tools were being used, but that wasn't that big a deal to me because we have the capability to help them with either of the more prevalent word processing tools that they might want to use. But I was particularly concerned about the presentation tools. And what I found was there is use across the board of all kinds of different things, and that was encouraging to me because that appeared to mean that they were open to using different things. And even those who didn't like one thing, I got a lot of talk against PowerPoint, might be open to learning to use something else. And we might be able to help them integrate all of these things at different times and different places into their teaching. So I found that to be pretty encouraging. The most important question that I think I asked was why? What would be the reluctance to use technology in teaching? And remember, this is only a 13-person response, so the pie slices look big when there's only one or two people who have responded in a particular way. But primarily, people didn't know how to use something, and that's exactly what we have. It's a whole unit of people who can show them how to do that. There were quite a few who were satisfied with their teaching methods, but I have to believe that at least some of them are using technology in teaching. So that's not necessarily saying I shall not be moved, and it's not necessarily adverse to what I'm trying to push out there. I only have seen no proof that technology improves teaching. That's what I mean by a big piece of pie. That's only one person. And I can show them proof so that I can respond to. So this looks good to me. I'm happy to see that I have quite a few opportunities to do what I'm trying to do. I'm not stuck. I was also happy to see how much time they were willing to dedicate. In one sitting, I get a couple people who will sit a half day with us. Over a term, I could feasibly put on 3 or 4 different things a term, or may even be able to do a half-day symposium and catch 7 or 8 people. 7 or 8 people is great to me. So I have a lot of willingness to come out. Everybody was willing to deal with one-on-one training. Some people were not willing to sit in the classroom and hear in front of their peers what they didn't know. But everybody, one-on-one, was willing to sit down with someone. And the Office of Teaching and Learning is in a position to do that. So, again, things are looking good for the 13 people that I have heard from. The final question was open-ended, and I thought some of the responses were really interesting. For the most part, our responses, we got more positive than negative. Some people think that it's absolutely necessary that they integrate technology in their teaching. Some people think that maybe not. The most striking response to me is that integrating technology into teaching is no substitute for excellent teaching. Well, I wasn't trying to push that in any way, shape, or form. And that says to me that maybe somebody doesn't quite understand that we're not trying to take over their teaching style. We're not trying to make them do things differently. We're just saying students learn differently now, and maybe, well, we are trying to make them do things differently. But we're not trying to eradicate everything they've ever done. And even the negative responses are telling. One of the things that the Office of Teaching and Learning will have to do in dealing specifically with law faculty is understand the interaction that goes on in a law classroom. At this point, that's not something that they have investigated, But because we have brought this to their attention, that's something that they know is different, that primarily they see as a challenge and really want to get in there and figure out how to fill this gap. So we have created an interest where they didn't know that there was an issue previously. Two things about PowerPoint seems to be quite hated. So I think that from reading the responses that some of the faculty had related to PowerPoint, one of the things that is really clear is that people don't understand there is effective use of PowerPoint and non-effective use of PowerPoint. And really one of the professors who spoke at the luncheon that we held does it wonderfully. He uses PowerPoint for emphasis, he uses PowerPoint for humor, he uses PowerPoint when something is so textual that someone may need to use it later. He uses PowerPoint so that students come into the class, he posts those before the class so that students come into the class knowing the direction that he's going. And he finds that things run very smoothly because of that. There doesn't have to be 40 slides for an hour of conversation. He tends to use about 4 or 5. And that was one of the things that I think is important, and actually one of the things that I want to be certain to do is to get him to sit down with the Office of Teaching and Learning. I figure we have 3 librarians who have law degrees, and we've been on this side of Socratic method teaching. We have him who has this particular professor who does it every day. And around the table with the Office of Teaching and Learning, I think we should be able to get them to understand what we need and provide for them the groundwork for what they can do to fill that need. They just don't know yet, and they're very interested right now in figuring that out. They wouldn't have known had we not come to the table and tried to figure out what to do. So some of the challenges, timing all around has been a challenge to me. The approval process, trying to decide whether or not I was going to lose my summer, and deciding that I was not going to. Lack of participation, which is in part related to the timing. There's no incentive structure, I said that before, and there are other schools and colleges in the university I'm working on adding using technology and teaching as an incentive, but we haven't gotten there yet. And in addition to timing, just having time. Nobody has any extra time anymore. So I have to make this important enough for people to take the time. And so far, they seem willing. So some of the plans that we already have. We have, for the fall, we have set up a plan for some bi-monthly discussions. And if we have 5 or 6 people who come out, that's great. That's enough to make a difference. And some of them are very simple things that have come up in everyday reference that we now have a means to respond to. For example, in the summer when there are a lot of faculty members who are dispersed, they're having trouble with remote database access. We can sit down and teach them that in 30 minutes. So one of the things that we know they need, just because they've called us on several occasions with it, we can respond to now, just us. We don't even have to go outside of the library at this point with that. We recently joined the consortium catalog and have changed some of the interlibrary loan systems. That's something that we need to sit down and we can talk to the faculty about, and we can use this time. Our vendors are always eager to show up and say something. They bring pizza and they generally have a good audience turnout. Course management tools is something that they can come out and give us some help with. And though the faculty are using Twin and LexisNexis Blackboard, there are some more sophisticated uses that those representatives can come out and help us with. So that's part of the plan for the fall. The media services guideline is one of the big things that we have to do, because that has been in the past a disincentive, that people didn't know exactly how to use the technology and what to do when it didn't work. And if we get that in writing in some kind and have them come out in some kind of way to make it clear that there is the safety net, then I think that we will progress a little more quickly. Effective PowerPoint for Socratic method teaching, that's what we're working on as a group now with the Office of Teaching and Learning. And we hope to have something that not only can be taught one-on-one, we know that they're open to that, but something that they can have a regular program for faculty to come to whenever, so that it's not something that happens once a year, and if you miss it, it's gone. The biggest thing that I am doing now is making sure that I stay in people's faces. Outreach is the most important thing, so that even though I haven't been there in 15 years, I can get the feedback and be the person who knows what they want, what they don't want, and which way we need to take this next. The demonstrations are what we are planning for the fall. We just started in the fall semester a faculty newsletter, and one of our librarians is very big on real-time awareness, so we'll be pushing a lot of information out there for the faculty to be able to respond to bring up ideas maybe they didn't have before. Maybe there were needs that they hadn't been able to articulate. So we are pushing information to them to help them develop those. The media services old fear, we're trying to work to get rid of that so that there isn't a fear that this will fail and I won't know what else to do. So that there are backups that are in place and that they know what those are. And in order to respond to the question, does this really enhance learning? I plan to have a literature review and sit down and demonstrate that there are statistics that show, yes, it does. And of course, the ongoing relationships are key, because those are the people who, without hesitation, responded when I had a question. Are there questions? Yes.
I just have a comment. The whole title of your presentation about shattered dreams and all that, and on the other hand, your efforts are admirable. They're so widespread and so deep. And I'm just wondering if your benchmark for what is successful needs to move a little bit. The baseball analogy of the 300 hitter comes to mind. That in professional baseball, if you fail 70% of the time, you're considered at the top of your field. And maybe 13 responses out of the faculty, I mean, maybe that can go up there as well, but maybe that's not so bad, considering faculty especially law faculty, are inherently difficult to get results.
Well, thank you very much. For the first few days after my survey closed, I walked around with my head down and my lip dragging. But as the days went by and I saw that the information was so useful, I started to brighten up. So I am at the point now where I feel that if I have a bi-monthly discussion and 5 people come, that is wonderful. I have succeeded. So it's just a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed list that is now becoming realistic. Anybody here?
I just have a question. Do students transfer out of Wayne State quite a bit or into Wayne State quite a bit, or what is this transfer population percentage?
It's not so much impactful in the law school, but we did not have any on-campus presence for living arrangements probably until the last 5 years. So around the
Oh, it's a commuter school.
Right,
Oh, okay.
right.
No, I was just wondering because I was thinking, well, if they're transferring out because they don't get the teaching good, that might be something to look at.
and we're working on it not being as much of a community school as it had been. That's one of the big pushes. And that's not that impactful for a law school as opposed to the undergraduate school.
No, that is something that you could use to sell more like Blackboard, whatever, course type thing, because then they get access more quickly.
And that's what they've been trying to do, but it hasn't been very successful. Again, because it's not incentivized. There's nothing that says if you do this, you will profit. So that's just my assessment. But that's something that we're working on, yes.
You said that you've been there for under 2 years, correct?
Under 1 year.
Under 1
A
year?
librarian for under 2
Okay.
years.
So you haven't had a chance to sort of benchmark over time. That's
Right.
going to be one of the things that tells you what's going on. We do the same thing here, and we'll say, well,
am now than where I started. So that's going to be something that you're going to be able to use to benchmark as you improve maybe your sector bar where it needs to go.
Yes.
Another strategy that's often been effective is peer coaching. You could identify, say, 2 or 3 or maybe 4 early users, heavy users who are willing to share their time. Have them give workshops, offer to assist. Maybe you can assign each one of them a certain group that they can write word on, check in, have them be the first line of support rather than go through the official channels of going to IT and so forth. Have these peer coaches who office close by, be the assistants, be the ones who introduce someone to new software and so on.
And a lot of that is going on that is not structured, that we don't know about.
Structure, it gives a little bit of recognition to people who are doing it informally. Incentives, you can have lunch, provide lunch for them every once in a while, these brown bag lunches, and it legitimizes things.
Which is why it was so important to me to have our first presence include law faculty to speak. And I think that we had 8 people come out that day, and I think a large part of that was that they were on the agenda. Yes.
Similar to a peer structure, you also have this, I noticed you had support staff, but you have the faculty support staff involved too. If they know that they can ask their administrative assistant or secretary, hey, I want to put this on the web, I don't have time, but you do. Can you do this for me? That will get a few more people involved in certain technologies.
That's great. And in fact, we have talked about having particularly the Licensed Law reps come in and talk to the support staff, which is going to be a process because a lot of them don't even have access to some of these tools because no one's ever asked them to put something on a twin page or something like that. But if we make it easier like that, I think we probably will get a better response. Yes.
The big thing is not to let yourself get burned out. Inevitably, most kinds of libraries, whether they're law or not, bring in a new librarian and put them in the media position right away because nobody else wants to do it. And there's a reason for that because there's very little support and you face all of these problems by yourself. So you really have to find a way to regulate that for your own sake.
I actually asked for this. So, I also volunteered to do ILL while the ILL person was out of the office. That was a little ambitious too, so I'll have to stop speaking so quickly.
Out of curiosity, was there anything done to get over a variety of things that they did, different programs they used? Did you pull any information out why they chose the particular methods that they used?
With the exception of why they didn't use technology at all, I didn't ask why they used what they did use. It's a good question. Anybody else? Thank you for coming to my first presentation ever.